Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for the spoiler talk for The Hunger, the book by Alma Katsu. What you got, Liv?
So, I don't know how I feel about this, right? We have, and this is, I mentioned in the review that like the approach, but like the choices that Alma made or the choice that Alma made. A goddamn book about the Donner Party. And I think it's kind of interesting. I guess we could say they're almost like zombies, right? Like thinking zombies are the supernatural characters in this, right? Like you get infected by one, you become that way.
Well, that was what, yeah, that's, and it wasn't clear until almost the end, right? Because in the beginning, I was like, what is this, a werewolf?
Mhm.
Is it a zombie? And you didn't really know until the end. So, like, the dude, the OG dude, is just like a regular killer, but then the people that he infects become weird zombie kind of people.
Right. Yeah. Like he has a bloodlust,
Yeah.
but his is a thinking man's bloodlust. Like he has control over his faculties. And yeah, but it's so that's cool. Like I have no issue with that. My issue is, and I'm going to put it simply as I can. How the fuck do you write a Donner Party book? And then cannibalism takes up a whopping like 4 paragraphs at the very end.
Yeah, it's very casual, too.
It was like
So-
it was so look, it was super dark. I mean, Tamsin like sacrifices herself so that like her kids have something to eat. Like it was touching and dark and morbid. But I'm go page by page. I'm like, is she even going to address the fucking cannibalism thing at all? It's the goddamn Donner Party. Like,
how about that fucking like paragraph where it's like someone just saw this woman take a baby outside to eat it. Like,
yeah, yeah.
oh man, that was just so like suddenly brutal. But yeah, cannibalism takes up a very very small amount of the book. You're right. You're right. That is a little bit weird.
It seriously, like you couldn't bury the lead more. Like I was sure that, as I'm getting through the book, I'm 65-70%. I'm like, oh, here's where it's going to start. And the rest of this is just going to be fucking nasty. Like not just nasty, but there would be like the discussions about this is what we have to do to survive. And, I was looking forward to that.
Right.
And then a bunch of really gross shit. And instead it's literally the last chapter. There are no decision makers in the process except for Kiesler. I wish I would have taken his name down.
Right.
Like you called him the original, like bad OG. Him and Tamsin are the only ones that are involved in any kind of discussion around it.
So the funny thing is, like reading that Wikipedia article about the Donner Party, one of the first things it says is that like the Donner Party was not remarkable compared to like the hundreds of other like travels across the country that happened in those times. It was just that for some reason the cannibalism, which was a really small part of it, actually kind of stuck as like a main part of the narrative. So even in like the historic record, it seems like cannibalism was not as big of a like a part of the story as everybody makes it out to be. And like in reading the article really quick, the confirmed cannibalism didn't necessarily even happen in those cabins. It's suspected and pretty probable that it happened in those cabins near the lake. But the very well recorded cannibalism was the group of people that left to go and try and get help, like those 8 people or whatever.
Yeah,
Those are the ones that ate the shit out of each other.
it's a weird thing, man. Like cannibalism. I don't know. I guess my thought was that we'd spend more time on it as readers, and I was. I don't even know if I was disappointed. I was just surprised that we didn't.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like I could, in my head, and I'm not a writer, but I was like, man, there could be some really good discussion around, doing this. I don't want to do this. We have to do this. The like gravity of actually doing it. And it's like we missed all of it. Although I love that scene with Tamsin and that other guy.
Yeah, that was when you finally realized what it meant. You were like, oh. Wow.
Yeah, like super dark and really like a gut punch, you know. It's just that, yeah, I don't know. So that was my thought. I didn't know if you were kind of thinking the same thing or not on that.
I wasn't as like I guess excited about it as you were. So It didn't it didn't bother me so much.
Did you ever read Exquisite Corpse?
This Poppy Z. Bright book?
Yes.
No, I did not.
Oh, I know what our next throwback's going to be.
Oh, wow. I wasn't in it for the cannibalism, I guess is what I'll say about that. But yeah, that whole reveal where, so essentially if I got it right, and you can set me straight if I'm wrong, she goes from where the Donners had been camping out to the lake where everybody else was, and kind of discovers that one dude who's, God, I wish I remembered his name, he had everybody huddled inside for safety, but he was out there cutting up the dead people to feed them, to keep them alive.
Yeah, so he was, I think, and yes, so I'm with you on that. I think also that because he is the carrier of the disease,
yeah,
I feel like he was kind of safe from the infected people, so that he was lighting fires outside to keep them away from the other people. But then, yes, he was also the guy that was filleting, children and whatever to feed the other ones and keep them alive.
Which was kind of interesting because like he was the kind of low key bad guy the whole time, but he could have just killed all the other 40 people if he wanted to.
Yeah,
and he was actually keeping them alive.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that struck me, and I guess I'll probably mention this in my wrap up too, like the dread, and obviously, I mean, even if this is just a straight up fiction story and we didn't kind of know, whatever the outcome or whatever you want to call it, like every time somebody left the group and the group got a little smaller, there was an anxiety built into that I thought was done really, really well, Yeah. So you get down to where it's just essentially the Donner family and a few of the Teamsters or hired hands or whatever, and like they're by themselves, and this other group is gone, another group's gone for help. Like the more they split up, like the more anxious I was about what was going to happen to him, even though I knew what was going to happen to him. And even if I didn't, I mean, you kind of see that's where the story was headed. If this wasn't a air quotes historical event.
Yeah. Didn't see Stanton killing himself coming. Like that kind of took me by surprise. Like the moment that he got bitten by one of the weird like zombie humans, yep. I knew that he was done for. But I mean, there was still like a good 15-20% of the book left when that happened, and he was like a pivotal character almost the entire way through.
Yeah, he's the closest thing we had to a main character, I feel, like a protagonist.
Yeah. Tamsin was weird because, like, I mean, let's face it, she was some old coworker. Mine used to say she was kind of whore.
So, you know what I mean? It was hard to get on her side. Like, Mary was another, potential protagonist, Mary Graves.
Yep.
But really, I felt like Stanton is who we were rooting for. He made all the good decisions. He had kind of the dark thing in his past, but then you find out that really none of it's his fault. But that's what I liked about him, was like, because he took that money, he felt like even more guilt. Like,
right.
Had he not have taken the money, he can go around telling people, look, man, I know you might not believe me, but look, her dad was raping her, and that's how she ended up pregnant. But because once he took that money and he spent that, or started to spend that money, I think he was kind of locked into that he was a bad guy. Now, we could argue if he was a bad guy or not for taking it. But I felt for him, like I could feel that spot that he was in. Like, this terrible thing went down. He didn't figure people were going to believe him versus a, rich, powerful man in town. But on top of that, he took essentially blood money.
Do you think that, so aside from the fact that he dies in history, do you think that he got a redemption narrative because of that? Like the whole staying behind so everybody else could escape when he killed himself, that whole thing?
I didn't feel it. I mean, that could very well be the way she meant it. But I just felt like he knew he was dying, and that was just a stand-up thing to do. I didn't really relate it back to his past.
He didn't want to be a zombie monster.
I mean, it's a tough thing, man. Like, I don't know. Like, we could talk about, I know you and I have talked about, like, our different approaches to the zombie apocalypse. Like, you would give in right away, right? Which is admirable. But, like, when you get to that point, the desire to live, my understanding, is very, very strong. when you're faced with, immediate mortality choices.
Yeah.
So it's tough to say on what someone, might or might not do. But yeah, I mean, I think that he was a stand-up guy, and staying behind and then doing that. I don't know realistically how many people are likely. I mean, do you think you would do that? Would you eat a bullet over becoming a zombie? Or would you hope that it's not going to be nearly as bad as you think, and that you still have some option to escape the infection or whatever?
I think that if I were to eat a bullet, it would be equal parts like not wanting to become a zombie for my own personal reasons, but also like a fuck you to the zombies, because like I'm not going to help spread your bullshit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know. I have trouble, like, whenever those kind of decisions come up, I think, like, yeah, I would do exactly what he did. But then, you see people cling to life.
In the moment, you might have a different...
Yeah, it's real easy sitting in my executive reclining office chair to say, oh, yeah, I would totally do that. Versus, would I chew through my own, through my own arm to get away from, some type of imminent death or something like that. And it's tough to say.
Yeah, it's true. So those, I don't even know if there's anything to say about the zombies. They were ill developed. Like they were always more like an outside threat than an actual like part of the book. Mm-hmm. Like they only showed up very sparingly, and really they were more haunting than hunting, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree. They reminded me of like characters in other horror books I've read. Like those characters would have fit right in like a Richard Lehman book. Like kind of wild, crazed killers, but they're not supernatural and like, that, only a bullet to the head kills them or anything like, you know what I mean? So yeah, they were on the periphery. This book felt more like a what if than like, let's incorporate a supernatural horror element into, if that makes sense. Because you're right. A lot of those people were dying without their help. Like, you know what I mean? Like it didn't take the zombies to kill off the majority of the Donner Party. Like poor planning and like shitty weather circumstances were enough.
Yeah. One snowstorm really did it for it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing though, talking about the whole contagious aspect of this, whatever it is, the hunger. I guess that's why the book is called The Hunger.
Could be.
It was interesting that in the doctor friend of Edwin Bryant, in their correspondence, and then Bryant's letters that he was writing to, I think, to Stanton or his wife, wherever it came up, Bryant and his friend, in talking about all this, Bryant had come up with the idea of basically being like a carrier for something without showing symptoms of it, which is something that happens actually. There's being perfectly immune to something, but there's also something where you can be a carrier but not be affected by it. Yep. And so it was interesting that it was portrayed as something that like we kind of understand as a thing now, but back then he was like, oh my God, could this be what it is? And it was like this weird scientific breakthrough because of something that doesn't actually exist in reality. That was pretty cool. Yeah,
that's called an asymptomatic carrier. So you're a carrier, but you show no.
Right, and you can pass it, but you don't suffer from it or whatever.
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll get some of this out here because I can't do it. I mean, I'm going to try to do it in my wrap up a little bit. I'm just really kind of torn about this book. Like, I think as a historical, like, take out the supernatural stuff. Like, I really liked character development, and I really liked kind of learning a little bit about that time. And even what I feel pretty strongly were 2019 interjections into that. Like, I don't know if Jim Reed was gay or not, but like adding that and what that meant then versus now was like really, really good and really well written. Like, we talked about, like, the zombies were such a like secondary thing that the supernatural element that she added to this historical tale like didn't work for me. If that made, like, there wasn't enough of that to have put that in there is kind of my opinion on it. So, like, I think I would have liked this book better if we told a straight fictional Donner Party story without the supernatural interjection, or you just went balls out and it was like The Walking Dead versus the Donner Party. Like, I feel like even that way would have been a little bit more where I would have felt like, I feel like it had trouble finding its place. Well, if that makes sense.
One thing that I think might have, so I don't have as deep of problems with it as it sounds like you do, but one thing I think that one approach that could be taken would have been to leave it unclear whether that was actually happening or not. Like, is this thing happening, or are they just going crazy? And this is how they're rationalizing, kind of going off of that like viral thought thing I was talking about earlier, the mob mentality. Like, it could just be that the mania of starving and everything bad that's going on has caused them to, like, basically mythologize the problems that they're experiencing. Like, it was unclear whether it was, like, legitimately supernatural, which the story absolutely goes out of its way to tell you that this is really happening. But if it was unclear whether it was that or just them going crazy, that could have been an interesting approach.
I like that one too. That didn't occur to me, but I think so. So yeah, I don't know. I think it had trouble finding its place. Like, I think it had trouble figuring out what it wanted to be a little bit.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So like I said, for spoiler reasons, I'm going to try to include that somehow in my wrap up, but without giving too much away, it might be a little tough.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move on?
No, I think that's going to be it I can't think of much else. Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. Hey, thanks for listening to Spoiler Talk, and more importantly, thanks for being a valued patron. As always, you guys make this so much easier to do, and we appreciate you.